My daughter left me a voicemail 8 months ago. And I still listen to it almost every night trying to figure out whether she was apologizing or manipulating me one last time. I know how that sounds. Trust me, I do. There are nights I sit in my car outside my own house replaying the same 47 seconds over and over like there's gonna be some hidden sentence in there I missed the first 50 times. Some crack in her voice. Some proof that the version of my daughter I loved is still in there somewhere. But every time I listen to it, I hear something different. One night she sounds cold. The next, she sounds exhausted. Then suddenly she sounds sincere and my whole brain starts turning against itself again. And the worst part is, she says I love you at the end. That's the part that keeps me trapped. Because if she sounded cruel, this would almost be easier. If she sounded evil or careless or obviously fake, I think my body would know what to do with that. Anger is simple. Grief is simple. But love mixed with betrayal? I don't know. I genuinely don't know where to put that inside myself. She hasn't called me in 8 months. Not on my birthday. Not on Thanksgiving. Not when my sister died in February. Nothing. Just silence. And I keep doing this thing, my therapist pointed it out actually, where I still think of the silence as temporary. Like I'm emotionally holding my breath waiting for her to come back and explain everything in a way that makes the world feel normal again. I don't think that's happening anymore. I think part of me knows that. But another part still checks my phone every morning before I even get out of bed. I hate admitting that. I'm 45 years old. I teach middle school art. I pay my bills. I survived a divorce in my 30s that almost flattened me emotionally. I am not, generally speaking, a fragile person. But this has made me feel unstable in ways I didn't know were possible. Because it's not just what happened. It's the realizing. The slow understanding. The horrible experience of going back through your memories and noticing things you should have noticed earlier. That's what's been eating me alive. Not just the betrayal. The fact that part of me saw it coming and chose not to see it fully. I want to start with the apartment because that's usually where my brain starts when I tell this story to myself. But honestly, no. That's not true either. See? I do this all the time now. I circle things. I rearrange the timeline emotionally because certain parts still feel radioactive to touch directly. There's something before the apartment. Something smaller. Something I didn't understand mattered until much later. My daughter, I'm gonna call her Mara. That's not her real name, but I can't. I can't sit here and say her actual name out loud right now. Maybe someday. Not now. Mara was 23 when she moved back home. This was about 4 years ago. She'd been in Portland trying to make photography work. Art shows, freelance shoots, portraits, all that unstable creative stuff people in their 20s convince themselves will magically become careers if they suffer hard enough. And it wasn't working. Though she never really said that directly. That was one of the first things about Mara that should have warned me something deeper was happening underneath her words. She had this way of handing you edited versions of herself. Especially when she was struggling. Even as a kid. If something hurt her, she'd present it like a finished report instead of a wound. She came home with 2 suitcases and this exhausted look she kept trying to smile through. And I remember something very specific. This is strange, but I remember standing in the doorway watching her drag her suitcase inside and thinking. She looks thinner. Not physically, necessarily. Emotionally thinner. Like pieces of her had been worn down somewhere I couldn't see. And then immediately, I corrected myself internally. Don't overread it, Diane. That phrase right there has ruined large sections of my life. Don't overread it. She hugged me and said, Mom, I just need 6 months. Just enough time to get back on my feet. And I said yes before she even finished talking. Of course I did. I loved having her home. That's the part one need people to understand, because later I started questioning whether my love made me stupid. Whether being that emotionally available to someone blinded me. But at the time, it felt good. Not burden good. Not guilt good. Good. The house had felt wrong after she moved away. Quieter in this heavy, unnatural way. Like something living had been removed from it. You stop realizing how much another person exists in your routines until they're gone. Then suddenly they're back and the kitchen has noise again. There are shoes by the door again. Somebody's laughing at midnight watching videos too loud in the other room. I missed that more than I admitted. We fell into routines fast. Friday nights we drink wine together and watch documentaries, cults, scams, political corruption, weird crime cases. Which honestly makes me sick to think about now sometimes. The irony of it. She'd sit curled up under this old blanket from high school and narrate everybody's bad decisions like she could see through people instantly. And I thought we were becoming close again. Not parent and child close. Adult close. That mattered so much to me. Too much maybe. She'd tell me stories about Portland. Friends. People she dated. Creative ideas. Funny disasters at coffee shops. And while she talked, I felt included in her life in this way I'd secretly missed for years. But now when I replay those conversations, something feels wrong about them. Not obviously wrong. That's the scary part. Just slippery. The stories had emotion but very few specifics. Faces without last names. Dramatic moments without details attached. And every time a conversation got too personal, too revealing, she'd redirect it gently without me noticing until later. And I didn't push. Because I was happy. God, that's hard to admit. I think I wanted the feeling of closeness badly enough that I ignored the strange empty spaces inside it. And looking back now, I think some part of me already knew there were things she was carefully keeping outside my line of sight. I just didn't understand yet that one of those things was Daniel. And when he finally walked into my house, I remember having this weird feeling for half a second. Just half a second. Like something in the room shifted. I ignored that feeling too. And I really wish I hadn't. The strange thing is, if you had met Daniel the night I met him, you probably would have liked him too. That's the part one keep needing people to understand, because I've had moments, especially after all this, where I could feel even close friends silently wondering how I missed it. Like maybe there should have been obvious warning signs. Creepy energy. Something visibly off. There wasn't. At least not in any way I knew how to identify at the time. Mara had been mentioning him casually for months before I actually met him. Little passing comments. Daniel sent me this article. Daniel thinks everybody romanticizes Portland too much. Daniel says this photographer is a fraud. Just background conversation. A name floating around enough to become familiar without becoming important. And honestly, looking back now, I think that was intentional. Not consciously maybe. I don't know anymore. But she introduced him slowly enough that by the time he actually showed up at my house, he already felt emotionally approved somehow. That realization makes my skin crawl a little now. One Friday night, maybe 8 or 9 months after Mara moved back in, she asked if he could come to dinner. "He's passing through town," she said. "I thought it'd be nice for you guys to finally meet." And there it was again from me. Yes. Always yes. I didn't even hesitate. I spent extra time cooking that night too. Isn't that awful? I can still remember standing in the kitchen worrying whether the chicken was dry because I wanted my daughter's friend to like me. That sentence alone probably tells you too much about my personality. Daniel showed up carrying wine and flowers. Not expensive flashy flowers either. Grocery store flowers. Which somehow felt more genuine. More thoughtful. And immediately he was easy to be around. Warm eye contact. Relaxed posture. The kind of person who made conversations feel smoother instead of heavier. He asked me about teaching art at the middle school and actually listened to the answers. Most people don't. They pretend to for about 30 seconds and then redirect back to themselves. But Daniel remembered details. I mentioned one student struggling with confidence during a charcoal project, and later, maybe 40 minutes later, he asked if she'd ended up finishing it. That stuck with me. Because people who remember small emotional details make you feel important. Seen. Or maybe more accurately, safe. And God, I hate that word now. Safe. There's this moment from that dinner I replay constantly. I was standing at the sink rinsing plates while Mara and Daniel argued in the living room about some documentary filmmaker. Not fighting, playful arguing. Laughing. And I remember looking at the reflection of them in the dark kitchen window and feeling this rush of relief. Relief. That's the exact emotion. I thought, oh thank God. She has people. People who understand her. People who care about her. And underneath that thought, this is hard to admit, there was another quieter one. Maybe she doesn't need me as much anymore. That should have made me sad. But mostly it made me proud. I think mothers are supposed to want that. Their children becoming whole separate people with whole separate lives. Now when I remember that moment at the sink, I physically feel sick sometimes. Because I had no idea I was standing inside something dangerous while feeling grateful for it. After dinner, Daniel helped clear plates without being asked. He laughed easily. Didn't dominate conversations. Didn't flirt inappropriately. Nothing dramatic. If anything, he seemed unusually emotionally intelligent. Which, honestly, should scare people more than obvious charm. The dangerous ones rarely arrive loudly. After he left, Mara got weird. Not angry. Not anxious exactly. Evaluative. That's the closest word I can find. She leaned against the kitchen counter watching me too carefully and asked. So? What did you think? And there was something tight underneath the question. Like the answer mattered more than it should have. I laughed and said, I liked him. He's lovely. And the second I said it, something in her relaxed visibly. Not a huge reaction. Tiny. But noticeable. This small satisfied smile crossed her face like I'd confirmed something for her internally. At the time I thought she was relieved because parents can be judgmental about friendships or relationships. Now I think she needed me comfortable with him. That realization didn't fully hit me until much later, though. At the time, I was just happy she seemed happy. About a month after that dinner, Mara announced she was moving out again. She'd found an apartment in the city with a friend. She sounded excited but emotionally scattered, like someone trying very hard to appear stable while standing on uncertain ground. And instead of questioning any of it, I threw myself into helping. Because that's what I do. I help. I bought her dish towels because the ones she picked looked sad and scratchy. I helped pack books into boxes. I drove the U-Haul because she hated driving large vehicles. Daniel helped too. He was there almost the entire day. Carrying furniture. Ordering pizza. Making jokes with the movers. Sliding so naturally into the rhythm of things that it almost felt like he already belonged inside our lives somehow. And there was this one moment. God, this one moment. Mara had gone downstairs to grab another load from the truck, and Daniel and I were alone in the apartment for maybe 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. He set down a box and said, "You know, she talks about you constantly. You've been really important to her." I can still hear exactly how gently he said it. And I remember my chest physically tightening because there had already been moments where I worried Mara was drifting emotionally. Pulling away in ways I couldn't quite define. So hearing someone close to her say I mattered. I absorbed that completely. Without skepticism. Without caution. I believed him instantly because I wanted it to be true. And maybe that's the part that humiliates me most now. Not that I was deceived. That I was emotionally reachable in exactly the way they needed me to be. Because looking back, I think trust was already being engineered around me before I even realized there was a structure there. The calls got less frequent after she moved out. Which is normal. I know that's normal. Kids grow up. They get busy. Lives expand outward. I kept repeating that to myself every time another week passed without hearing from her. I was trying so hard not to become one of those mothers who guilt their children for independence. So I stayed casual. Easygoing. Healthy about it. But there's a difference between giving someone space and slowly training yourself not to notice their absence. And somewhere during that first year after she moved out, I crossed that line without realizing it. Then one day I noticed something strange. Daniel disappeared completely from her stories. No mentions. No updates. Nothing. And when I casually asked about him once, she answered too fast. "Oh, we kind of drifted apart." Then immediately changed the subject. It was subtle. Tiny. But I remember this weird cold feeling flickering through me for maybe half a second before I pushed it away. Don't overread it, Diane. There's that sentence again. I should probably put it on my gravestone at this point. Because what I didn't know then, what I would eventually learn in a way that made me feel genuinely stupid, was that Daniel had not disappeared from her life at all. Not even close. He was still there. Still deeply there. Just hidden now. And the fact that she suddenly needed to hide him should have terrified me long before it finally did. I keep coming back to Thanksgiving. Not because that's when everything broke open. It wasn't. Honestly, what unsettles me most is how normal it felt. Warm even. That's what betrayal does eventually, I think. It contaminates good memories retroactively. You stop trusting moments that once comforted you because now you know something was happening underneath them that you couldn't see yet. This was maybe a year and a half after Mara moved out. She'd skipped the previous Thanksgiving because of what she called a work conflict. And I remember feeling hurt about it for maybe 10 minutes. Then immediately talking myself out of being hurt because I didn't want to become emotionally demanding. I was always managing my own reactions around her. Always trying to seem understanding. Flexible. Safe. When she told me she was coming that year, I got embarrassingly excited about it. I cleaned the whole house top to bottom like she was a guest instead of my daughter. I bought those crescent rolls she liked as a teenager. I even pulled out this ugly ceramic turkey platter my sister used to mock relentlessly. My sister was there too. That part hurts differently now because it was the last Thanksgiving I had with her before she died in February. And there's something brutal about losing two people at once in completely different ways. One to death. One to silence. Mara seemed mostly relaxed that weekend. Quieter than she used to be maybe, but adulthood changes people. I kept telling myself that. We cooked together. We argued about stuffing exactly the way we always had. She said I used too much sage. I told her she had no taste and she laughed so hard she almost spilled wine on the counter. Normal. Everything felt so painfully normal. That's what makes the memory hard to sit inside now. Because part of me still watches those moments and thinks, see? There she is. That's her. That's my daughter. And another part immediately answers. Then how could she do this to you? I still don't have a satisfying answer to that question. The last night before she left, I found her sitting outside on the back steps staring at her phone. It was freezing outside. Cold enough that I could see her breath. I remember thinking it was strange she wasn't wearing socks. I brought her tea because... I don't know. That's just what mothers do. You see your child alone in the cold and your body automatically starts trying to comfort them before your brain even catches up. The second I stepped outside, she flipped her phone face down. Fast. Too fast. And I noticed it immediately. That's important. I noticed. But then came the reflex. The same reflex that kept sabotaging me over and over throughout this story. Don't overread it. She deserves privacy. She's an adult. Don't make everything weird. So instead of asking why she hit the screen so quickly, I handed her the tea and sat beside her. And there was this strange distance in her that night. Not coldness exactly. More like partial presence. Like only half of her was sitting there with me while the other half was somewhere else entirely. I asked if she was okay. She smiled without fully looking at me and said, "Yeah, Mom. Everything's great. Everything's great." I swear to God, if I hear those words now my nervous system reacts immediately. Because looking back, no. That's not exactly right. Looking back, I think part of me knew she was lying. Not consciously. But physically. There's this thing your body does sometimes when reality and language stop matching. Tiny little alarms. A pause too long. A smile slightly delayed. Something in your stomach tightening before your brain forms a thought. And every single time I felt one of those alarms with Mara, I smothered it with empathy. I translated discomfort into compassion. That realization has honestly changed the way I understand my entire adult life. A few months after Thanksgiving, my finances started getting strange. Small things at first. That's what really scares me now. If it had been dramatic immediately, maybe I would have acted faster. But it wasn't dramatic. It was subtle enough to blend into ordinary stress. A recurring charge I didn't recognize. An account balance lower than expected. Tiny inconsistencies that could easily be explained away by distraction or bad memory. And I explained them away constantly. I blamed myself first every single time. I thought maybe I forgot subscriptions. Maybe autopay processed early. Maybe I'd moved money and forgotten. I even remember sitting at the kitchen table one night feeling genuinely worried that I was becoming careless with money as I got older. That part humiliates me now. Because while I was questioning my own memory, somebody else already knew exactly what they were doing. Then one afternoon I got a call from the bank. I was sitting in a Target parking lot and almost ignored it because it came from an unknown number. Thank God, I answered. The woman on the phone asked if I had recently applied for a personal loan. And I laughed at first. Not because it was funny. Just because the question felt absurd. No, I said immediately. I didn't apply for a loan. There was this tiny pause on the line. Then she said, "Well, someone submitted an application in your name." I can still remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt afterward. The world didn't feel real for a second. Not dramatic movie-style panic. Worse. Disorientation. Like reality tilted slightly sideways and my brain couldn't get stable footing again. The woman kept explaining fraud procedures while cars moved around me in the parking lot and people walked past carrying shopping bags, and somehow everybody else's life was continuing normally while mine suddenly wasn't. I clung to the stranger explanation immediately. A hacker. Identity theft. Some random faceless person online. Because random danger feels safer than personal betrayal somehow. Random means nobody chose you specifically. The bank started asking questions about who had access to my information. And this is where the shame starts creeping in for me. Because 3 separate times they asked if there was anyone close to me who might have had access to sensitive documents. 3 times. And every single time, I protected Mara automatically. I mentioned an old contractor. A previous roommate situation. Mail theft. Anything else. Everything else. I reached into every corner of my life looking for alternative explanations because saying her name out loud would have made the possibility real in a way I still couldn't emotionally survive. Then one night I was sitting alone at my kitchen table surrounded by paperwork. Bank statements. Fraud reports. Passwords scribbled on sticky notes. The television was on mute in the background. And suddenly, out loud, to an empty room, I heard myself say, "It was Mara." Just like that. No build-up. No dramatic realization. The sentence came out before I consciously decided to think it. And the second it left my mouth, this horrible stillness settled over me because deep down, I think my body had known before my mind allowed itself to know. I sat there staring at the paperwork thinking, no, absolutely not. That's your child. But another part of me had already started rearranging old memories into new shapes. The hidden phone. The redirected conversations. Daniel disappearing. That satisfied smile after I said I liked him. Suddenly all those moments started leaning toward each other in ways that made me feel physically sick. And the terrifying thing was, I still wasn't fully ready to believe it. Even then. Even after saying her name out loud. Because when I finally called Mara about it, she sounded so calm that I almost abandoned my instincts all over again. I called her. That's the part one still replay the most. Not what I said. Not what she said back. The fact that I called her before I had anything solid enough to hold on to. Because there's a moment in situations like this where you can either step forward into certainty, or you can reach for the person you love most and ask them to help you make sense of it. I reached for her. And I didn't accuse her. I need to be very clear about that because sometimes when I think back, I worry my memory is rewriting me into someone more dramatic than I actually was. I didn't say, "You did this." I said there were irregularities in my accounts. I said the bank was investigating. I asked, very carefully, if she remembered any paperwork I might have shared during her move years earlier. That was it. And there was this pause on her end. Just a small one. Then her voice came through calm. Too calm, maybe, but at the time I didn't register it that way. "Mom, are you okay?" That was her first response. Not defensiveness. Not confusion. Concern. Like I was the one falling apart. And something in me softened immediately. I hate admitting that, but it did. Because that's what she always knew how to do with me. Shift the emotional center of gravity back onto my feelings. She said she vaguely remembered lease paperwork, maybe some insurance forms, but nothing beyond that. She sounded steady. Controlled. Even caring. She asked if I needed her to come over. If I needed help. If I was overwhelmed. And within minutes, I was back in that familiar place where I was doubting myself more than I was doubting the situation. For 48 hours after that call, I genuinely thought I had misread everything. 48 hours of relief. Then guilt for even suspecting her. Then confusion again. Then relief again. It was like my mind couldn't stabilize in one version of reality for more than a few hours at a time. And that's what scares me most when I look back. Not just deception. But how easily I could be pulled away from my own instincts when the person I trusted most sounded calm enough. I started telling myself a story again. Maybe I was overwhelmed. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was becoming one of those people who sees patterns where none exist. I even remember thinking, I should apologize to her for worrying her. God. That makes me sick now. Because while I was spiraling in doubt about myself, something else was happening quietly in the background that I still didn't fully understand. Daniel came back into the conversation. Not in person. Just reappearing. Like a shadow returning to the edge of light. Mara mentioned him almost casually one day, as if he'd never been gone. She said he was going through a difficult time and she'd been helping him out. And I remember something inside me going completely still. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just alert. Like my nervous system finally recognized a pattern it had been missing. Because I hadn't heard his name in months. Not once. And now suddenly he was back, tied to vulnerability again, tied to need again, tied to her again. It didn't make sense. Or maybe it made too much sense. I don't know which is worse. I did something I'm not proud of. Or maybe I am. I still can't decide. I reached out to someone from Mara's college circle. A woman named Trish. I barely knew her. We'd met once years ago at a graduation event. I found her online and sent a message that was probably too honest. Too exposed. I asked her if she knew anything about Daniel. I told her I was confused. That something felt wrong. That I needed context I wasn't getting. Then I waited. 3 days. 3 days of checking my phone constantly. Of second-guessing whether I should have even sent the message. Of trying to act normal while feeling anything but. And when she finally replied, I was standing in a grocery store parking lot. I remember the exact spot. Even now. She said Daniel had a history. Financial manipulation. Patterns of involvement in situations that didn't end cleanly. Complicated relationships with families, she wrote. And then she added something that made my stomach drop so hard I had to grip the edge of my cart. Mara knew. Not suspected. Knew. For years. And according to Trish, she had defended him every time. I stood there reading that message while people walked past me carrying groceries, talking about dinner plans, arguing about parking spaces. Normal life. And mine just stopped. I went inside the store anyway. I bought milk. Bread. Fruit. I smiled at the cashier. I said thank you. I functioned. Because I didn't know what else to do with a body that had just been told its entire understanding of its own child might have been incomplete for a very long time. And I didn't cry until I got back to my car. That's when it came. Not quiet crying. The kind where you can't breathe properly and your hands won't stop shaking and you have to press your forehead against the steering wheel just to keep yourself from falling apart completely. Because here's the thing I didn't understand before that moment. It wasn't just the information. It was what the information did to every memory I had. Suddenly everything reassembled itself. The phone turned face down. The controlled answers. The way Daniel was described but never seen clearly. The satisfied look after I approved of him. It all started pointing in one direction I didn't want to look at. And the worst part? Even then, part of me still resisted it. Because accepting it would mean accepting something about my daughter I was not emotionally prepared to survive. But I called her again anyway. And this time everything changed. I called her again. And I want to be honest about something that still bothers me when I think about it. I didn't call her because I was ready. I called her because I couldn't stay inside my own head anymore. That's what this situation does to you. It doesn't just create answers you don't want. It traps you in the process of trying to avoid them. So I called. And this time, my voice was different. I can hear it in my memory. Less soft. Less careful. Not angry exactly, but no longer bending itself into comfort. I told her I needed clarity. I told her the bank investigation was escalating. I told her I couldn't keep going in circles. And there was silence on her end. A long one. The kind of silence that makes you start wondering if the call dropped. But it didn't. She was there. I could hear her breathing. And for a split second, I actually thought, maybe this is it. Maybe she's about to finally tell me everything and this whole nightmare is about to resolve itself into something painful but clean. I would have taken painful. Painful is easier than unclear. Then she spoke. And her voice was still calm. But it wasn't soft anymore. It had distance in it. Like she had stepped back emotionally while I was still standing too close. Mom, she said, I think you're really overwhelmed right now. And something in me just cracked internally at that phrasing. Not loudly. Quietly. Because again, she wasn't denying anything. She was reframing me. That's what she always did when things got tense. She said she didn't know what I was talking about in detail. She said she remembered helping with paperwork years ago but nothing beyond that. She said I might want to speak to someone, maybe a professional, because I sounded stressed. And I remember gripping my phone so tightly my hands started to hurt. Because I could feel it happening again. That slow shift. Where suddenly I was no longer the person responding to facts. I was the person being evaluated for emotional stability. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt myself almost go back. Almost apologize. Almost soften. Almost retreat into the version of myself that makes things easier for other people. But then I said something I didn't plan. I told her Trish had contacted me. There was a pause. A real one this time. Different from before. And I felt it immediately. That change in energy. Like a door quietly closing somewhere between us. I told her what Trish had said. About Daniel. About his history. About the pattern. About her knowing. And there was another silence. This one felt heavier. Not uncertain. Decided. And when she finally spoke again, her voice had changed completely. Still controlled. But colder. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said. And I remember that line more than anything else. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was precise. Then she said something I didn't fully understand in the moment. She said I was mixing things up. She said I was being influenced by outside narratives. She said I needed to step back and focus on my own mental health. And then she hung up. Just like that. No argument. No denial. No emotional collapse. Just disconnect. I stood there holding my phone after the call ended, staring at it like it had stopped being a phone and become something else entirely. Because I realized something in that moment that I hadn't been willing to fully acknowledge yet. Innocent people usually try to stay connected. They don't just cut the line. And that realization didn't feel like anger at first. It felt like grief. Immediate, heavy grief. Because whatever version of her I had been trying to protect was no longer reachable in the way I needed her to be. 3 days later, I got the voicemail. That's the one I told you about at the beginning. I still don't listen to it the same way twice. Sometimes it sounds like love. Sometimes it sounds like strategy. Sometimes it sounds like someone trying to gently close a door without making noise. She said she loved me. She said she was stepping back for her mental health. She said she hoped I got support. And I keep circling that one sentence. I love you. Because I don't know what it means anymore when someone can say that at the same time they are removing themselves from accountability. Maybe both things are true. Maybe that's the part one can't accept yet. And after that voicemail, she was gone. 8 months of silence. No responses. No clarification. Nothing. Just absence. And during those 8 months, I started doing things I never expected. I kept her room exactly as it was. Not intentionally at first. It just stayed. Like if I changed it, I would be acknowledging something final that I wasn't ready to face. Her sweater is still on the back of the chair. A cracked mug she made in high school is still on the shelf. I walk past the room sometimes and don't open the door because I know if I do, I'll just stand there and lose time again. I've sent 2 cards. No response. Birthday. Christmas. Nothing. And I keep telling myself I should stop. But I haven't yet. Because stopping feels like accepting a version of this story I'm still not fully ready to live inside. And the hardest part is this. Even after everything I know now, I still catch myself waiting for her name to appear on my phone. Like maybe this time, she'll say something that makes it all make sense. And I hate that part of me for still hoping. I don't think there was ever going to be a version of this that felt like an ending. That's something I've had to accept slowly, against my will, over months of silence. Because part of me kept waiting for a moment where everything would resolve into something clean. A confession. An explanation. A breakdown where she finally says, this is what happened, and this is why. Something that would let me place the whole story down and say, okay. I understand it now. But that moment never came. And I'm starting to understand it might not. There are days where I function completely normally. I go to school, I teach my students, I talk about color theory and sketching techniques, and I laugh at things that are actually funny. I look like myself from the outside. And then there are moments where something small triggers everything again. A notification sound. A name that looks like hers on my phone. A photo that reminds me of her face in a way I didn't expect. And I'm right back inside it. Right back inside the questions. Right back inside the silence. Right back inside that voicemail. The investigation is still ongoing. I can't go into details, and honestly, even if I could, I'm not sure I have the emotional language for all of it yet. There are parts of it that still feel too fragmented to describe cleanly. But what I can say is this. The financial damage is real. It changed things. It changed my future in ways I am still learning how to adjust to. But even that isn't the deepest impact. The deepest impact is psychological. It's the way I now second-guess my own memory. It's the way I replay conversations looking for hidden meanings that I didn't notice the first time. It's the way I now understand that trust is not something that breaks all at once, it dissolves gradually, and sometimes you don't realize it's gone until you're already standing inside the aftermath. I still think about Daniel more than I want to. Not because he's the center of this, but because he represents something I didn't recognize in real time. The ease of influence. The way someone can feel warm, helpful, attentive, and still be operating with intentions you never would have assigned to them. And I think about Mara in a way that is harder to describe. Because I don't know where the boundary is anymore between who she was and what she became in this situation. That's the part one struggle with most. People want clear categories. Victim. Perpetrator. Good. Bad. But real life doesn't always separate that cleanly, especially when it involves family. Especially when it involves love. And I still love her. That doesn't switch off. I wish it did. I wish betrayal made emotions simpler. But it doesn't. It just makes them heavier. There are nights I sit in her old room and just look at everything the same way it was left. And I don't know if that's grief or denial or some mixture of both that I don't have a name for yet. Sometimes I pick up the cracked mug she made in high school and I just hold it for a while. Because it's one of the only things that still feels like it belongs to a version of her I can understand. And then I put it back exactly where it was. I haven't changed anything in there. I can't tell if that means I'm preserving her, or freezing myself. My sister used to say things in a very direct way. She didn't soften anything for me. Before she passed, she told me something I keep replaying in my head. She said, "You keep trying to understand people into innocence." At the time, I didn't fully grasp what she meant. Now I do. Because I think I spent most of my life believing that if I understood someone deeply enough, I could always find a version of them that made their actions make sense. That belief has not survived this experience. Or maybe it has, but in a much more painful form. Because I still want to understand her. Even now. Even after everything. And that's the part that confuses me the most. I don't know if she'll ever come back into my life in any meaningful way. I don't know if there will be a conversation that resolves anything. I don't know if the silence is temporary or permanent. What I do know is that I can't keep living inside the version of this story where I pretend not to know what I know. That's what finally pushed me to speak about it at all. Not closure. Not resolution. Just refusal to keep shrinking around it. I have a daughter. I love her. I don't know who she is right now. And I don't know what version of her I'm still holding on to. But I do know I'm done rewriting reality just to make it easier to carry. This is what happened. This is where I am. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not going to soften it.